This episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast is brought to you by DeviceTalks Tuesdays. Join us this Tuesday at 4 p.m. to hear from our friends at PhotoFab. The topic will be precision metal parts, procurement made easy. Go to DeviceTalks.com to register. It's free and you should be there. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
This is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. This is episode number 51. Happy to have you back here. We've got a great show for you today. The first keynote conversation we'll have is with Christina Jones. Christina Jones is the CEO and founder of GuardianLane.com. GuardianLane won the first pitch contest held by MedTech Color. You might remember couple of episodes ago, maybe 4 or 5, we had Dr. Angelique Johnson, the CEO of MemStem, on the show. She's also a co-founder of MedTech Color. It's a group that's advancing representation of people of color in the medical device industry. They had their first pitch contest this week. Christina Jones and GuardianLane won, so we're having her on the show to tell her very cool story and to talk about GuardianLane's mission. It's really essential, and it's one that we don't talk about nearly enough here on MedTech. That is mental health, and particularly helping children who are dealing with grief. And we've got a lot of that going on these days. So great to have her on the program. Great to hear her story. I'm also thrilled, exceptionally thrilled, especially thrilled to have Steve MacMillan. He is the CEO, president, and chairman of Hologic. This is sort of a great return for Hologic. Hologic was one of our first companies represented on the podcast. We had them on episode 2, and we'll talk about that in the discussion. They, of course, had an exceptionally busy and important year. They really shifted gears into diagnostics. They really stepped up and helped diagnose COVID. And Steve will talk about that transition, how their plans were impacted by COVID, accelerated by COVID, and also where are we going from here. And they're also working on a very cool global women's health index, and we'll hear more about that. So exceptionally thrilled to be bringing you this conversation. And I'm also thrilled to be bringing my podcast partner, Chris Newmarker, onto the show. How are you, Chris?
Doing well. Happy Friday, Tom. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I'm feeling a little FOMV there, Chris. A little fear of missing the vaccine. It seems like everybody's getting vaccinated before we are up here in Massachusetts.
We're starting. Yeah, like even our medical team is, starting to see people we know in our company getting vaccinated. Here in Minnesota, they're rolling out to everybody over 16 starting next Tuesday. Like we're talking here on Friday, and we're finally getting this thing rolled out in Minnesota. But man, yeah, I hope things get better in Massachusetts soon, and they start rolling that out there too. Because it sounds like you wanted to get vaccinated yesterday.
I can't help but think that if they hadn't let Tom Brady go, I'd be getting vaccinated. Am I crazy to put that connection together?
Brady would have gotten it done.
I think Brady would have gotten it done. I really do.
Yeah, because it was like, he can win a playoff game, and
he's just a winner. He's a winner, Chris. He's a winner.
Right.
So I was harkening back
to
the
Boston accent there. little New England just threw in there.
I can throw it in there from time to time. I think I called you kid last week on the podcast,
hey, kid.
Which is a total Boston. Yeah,
what's in my 40s, Tom. You call me a kid.
Doesn't matter. We're all kids.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So I was listening to our very first podcast over a year ago, and it was I think showed a lot of courage on our part with our first choice of topic. Do you remember what our first bit of banter was? What I asked you about on the very first episode of DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast?
Oh my gosh, Tom! With this pandemic, it feels like it's 100 years ago. Like, were we talking about like? What kind of horses we use with our wagons?
I was asking you a critical question, Chris. Have you found any toilet paper?
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. And you were having trouble scoring toilet paper, but you said it would all work out, and
it all worked out. There There's never an absence of toilet paper in the new marker household.
I think it showed again great courage on our part to make our very first conversation about toilet paper. I think that's why people keep coming back,
right,
for insights like that. Yeah,
the courage. Yeah,
they might also come back for our intense new markers newsmakers list. Chris,
there we go. All right, let's do it.
Let's roll into
Let's do it, man. New markers newsmakers for the week.
We're going to run number 5 to 2. And then for number 1, we'll bring in
a special guest.
Should I just say a special guest? I almost said it.
There we go.
All right, we'll just say a special guest who will speak to the number 1 item on Newmarker's Newsmakers list. So, all right, Chris Newmarker, hit it off.
All right, number 5 on the list, we've got Thermo Fisher Scientific is launching this device called the Thermo Scientific AeroSense Sampler, and we have a picture of this thing on Medical Design and Outsourcing and Mass Device, and it looks like a toaster oven. It looks like a toaster oven. I could picture somebody in a break room walking in and being like, oh, there's a new toaster oven. And then they realize it's actually this thing that sucks in air from the surrounding area and samples it. And you send this stuff to a lab. And within 24 hours, you get results about, what kind of pathogens are in the air, including COVID-19. But yeah, kind of a neat device. You have a picture where they're showing it looks like cool. It's in a factory, which we have a lot of we're in an industry that has plants making medical devices and parts and all kinds of stuff. So I mean that would certainly give me some peace of mind if I was in a workspace and they had something like taking air samples and letting everybody know if there's been a COVID-19 exposure in the air. So yeah, kind of cool piece of equipment.
Yeah, great device. It looks to me, I'm looking at the picture right now, it looks to me like a toaster oven had a child with Nomad, the wayward space drone that was reclaimed by the Enterprise in the original Star Trek.
Wow.
Yeah, remember that one?
Wow, you were really reaching back on that one.
A little bit.
At least you didn't start talking about Babylon 5 or something,
No, I'm not a big Babylon 5 guy. And I'm not a big Doctor Who guy either. Which my son actually had a good question. If Doctor Who travels in time, why isn't he Dr. When?
Wow.
I know, right?
That's deep. I tell you, the young, youth, they realize these things that
I had no good answer for him. And I still don't know why this guy is blue either. So this kid is suffering.
That's because we have a lot of nitrogen in the air, Tom. The nitrogen, reflects out, blue light.
Well, thank you, Chris.
I'm not sure if that's true, but I think
I'll go tell him that right now.
It's a good guess. You gotta roll with the punches, Tom.
Speaking of seeing things, number 4, Chris.
Number 4 on the list, we've Second Sight, which in the past has been a really, really interesting company like this, retinal prosthesis, that could help people who are blind, in some way, like see things again. They had a really tough year last year.
Yeah.
The plan was that they're going to be merging with this Pixium Vision that they're going to do something with, but it looks like the deal is in trouble now. I guess the good news for Second Sight is that they have some investors lined up and they're planning to raise nearly $28 million. So that's the good news. It sounds like Pixium, at least according to Second Sight, an SEC filing, they said the Pixium informed them that this would break their memorandum of understanding for a merger to do the private placements. So they even said in the SEC filing this thing could be heading to court. So maybe there won't be a Second Sight Pixium Vision merger.
Yeah, it's an interesting story that you wrote, and I'm not quite clear on what the lack of communication was between the two, but I hope it's figured out because Second Sight, as we talked about, it's a very cool company and it's able to help restore vision with people who lost it due to retinitis pigmentosa. Right. And it's actually my uncle had retinitis pigmentosa, so it's in our family. And wow. It was definitely a first generation model, but it was the kind of thing that you could see 10 years, 20 years from now being a real life restorer. So I hope that gets sorted out.
The idea that you could wear goggles or glasses that would basically do seeing for you, and then like deliver that information to your brain so you could see again is just an awesome idea.
All right, now it's time for our first keynote conversation. As I mentioned up top, I had the chance to speak with Christina Jones. Christina is the CEO and founder of GuardianLane.com. GuardianLane beat out a number of great companies in MedTech Color's first pitch contest. So GuardianLane took first place. Second place went to Starling Medical, with its founder, Alex Revelos. Third place went to Zienza Biosciences, founder Derek Danyard. Fourth place was a tie between Alva Health, founder Sandra Saldana, and Respira Labs, founder Maria Artunduaga. So congratulations to MedTech Color for a great pitch contest. And of course, we're going to hear from the winner of the pitch contest, Christina Jones, right after we hear from Brandon Hoser. Brandon is the sales manager at PacWorld USA. Let's listen.
Over the last several weeks, we have been discussing who PacWorld USA is and what we do. The main point I would like to express is that we are the experts in heat sealing. We have been at this for over 25 years, encountering a wide variety of applications. Although PacWorld's main focus is to provide medical-grade heat sealing equipment, we, along with our sister company, TOS Machine Components, have worked on some interesting projects within and beyond the medical realm. Our TOS heat sealing technology has been used for sealing consumer items such as blister packaging of toy cars and for high-speed food packaging and automated lines. In more critical applications, our equipment is used in the manufacturing process of dirigibles and even the cooling systems of spacesuits. Since the coronavirus pandemic, our equipment has become more sought after domestically and abroad. TOS technology has been used to retool old equipment here in the United States to produce N95 masks as the need grew to manufacture domestically. PacWorld machines are used for the manufacturing of single-use bioreactor bags, which is a critical need in the production of vaccines. Of course, PacWorld heat sealers are still needed to seal overwrap sterilization bags for test kits and other devices. The many applications PacWorld has provided solutions for is a testament to our tribal knowledge and expertise in heat sealing. Please call us to discuss your application at 610-746-2765 or email info@pacworldusa.com.
Well, Christina Jones, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you've had quite a week. Congratulations on your winning the MedTech Color pitch contest. That's great. I want to get into your background a bit, and then we'll talk about your company, GuardianLane, your CEO of GuardianLane, which is not necessarily a MedTech company by our definitions, but it's certainly an important healthcare company, I think. And I'm really kind of excited to talk about it. It sadly feels very needed and topical right now with all that's gone on. So what is your background? How did you become CEO of this company?
Yeah. So I guess my first, job as an adult, I should say, was actually in advertising. I was an art director at a few advertising agencies and built digital campaigns and commercials for brands such as SeaWorld, Disney, and then was a photo art director for Walmart. So any visual that you saw come out of Walmart, I had something to do with that. And wow. I shouldn't say just me, it was me and my team. Actually, randomly in Hollywood, Florida, you would never expect a studio out of Hollywood, Florida to be producing so much content for some amazing brands. So the world's largest brands.
I didn't realize that was coming out of Hollywood, Florida.
Yeah.
So how did you then shift over to, this is not your first company. You had another company, Court Buddy, where you were a co-founder. So how did you move from being someone in arts or graphic arts or creativity into running a company?
Yeah. So my husband was an attorney, and he knew that he wanted to start a business that was beyond just himself. And so because I was under the same roof, he was always asking me questions and telling me about his ideas. Because like you mentioned, I do come from a creative background. That's just how my brain is wired. So I was helping him think about, how to think about strategies in a completely different way. And throughout the process of thinking how he can have a business somehow in the legal sphere, we realized that there was a new ruling in courts that were allowing attorneys to appear for single court appearances. And so just seeing this ruling and asking around if people knew about it and finding that the general population had no idea that an attorney can just appear for one court appearance and then essentially bow out of your case, we thought, could this potentially make legal services affordable? And so I saw how my husband was running the firm at the time, and he was, charging some of his clients $300, $400 flat rates, no retainer. And I asked him, is this something specific to you, or is this something that can be replicated? And he said, solo attorneys could 100% do this all the time. So we married that single court appearance, the ability for an attorney to appear for a single court appearance with the flat rates, and created a platform where you could easily find an attorney within seconds for your specific case. And actually the person who needed the attorney, the consumer, actually put in their price. And so you would find an attorney that fit within your budget, and you could get to work that day.
Wow. So the significance of that ruling was that you don't have to connect with an attorney long term. You don't have to pay a retainer or anything like that. You could just have them come and represent you for that moment or that hearing, and then you're paying basically for the hour or however long it took.
Exactly. And it was actually the court's initiative to allow people to have access to attorneys, but nobody knew about it. There were some attorneys that didn't even know about it. So it was just, the timing was perfect.
And was this in Florida exclusively, or is this broader than that?
So we started in Miami to test it out, and quickly got interest from other counties in Florida. Then randomly Texas came knocking on the door. We got so many inquiries from Texas. And so we had to decide, okay, what type of business do we want to build? Do we want to build a large scalable business? And so we said, hey, why not? If people need it, why are we holding it back? And so we ended up scaling it to every single state, and also raised money through a Series A to do that.
Wow.
So moved from Florida to San Francisco, and did the whole, song and dance in Silicon Valley. And then it got to a point where, we were getting a little pressure to grow faster, and it didn't feel as authentic as it did in the beginning. So we had to make the decision as entrepreneurs, or is this something we want to ride until the sunlight, or do we have more in us? And we really missed those early days. And so we decided with our board to step down and be able to create new businesses.
Wow. What is the status of Court Buddy now?
So it has changed. I think it got bought out, and it is now Law Champs.
Okay.
Completely different concept from what we had created. So that's a little, it kind of hurts my heart. We were helping so many people, but from what I hear, it's still, it's still in operation, which as a first-time entrepreneur, you can only, be happy that your first baby is still alive. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's interesting that you have Court Buddy and now GuardianLane, and both have very, I should say, benevolent functions in terms of helping people who providing help for people who need the help. We usually talk to people who are creating devices to make people less sick or hopefully make them better. This is another way to sort of help people. Is your primary driver, or do you like being an entrepreneur and the thrill of creating a company, or are you really driven more by the purpose that is sort of at the front of that?
I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah.
I've always been enamored by the fact that just a single thought can transform people's lives. And then also being able to see a company scale from 2 people in a home to an office in San Francisco with 30 employees, that's just magic. So, once you get a taste of that, you cannot go back to working for somebody else.
I bet. So tell us a bit about GuardianLane. What was the origin of this? Well, actually, in between Court Buddy and GuardianLane, you worked for Investment Group. Is that right?
Oh, for 500 Startups. Yeah. So 500 Startups was actually an investor in Court Buddy. And so once we stepped down and they learned about it, they were like, come help us with our companies. So I think it was a month before COVID hit. COVID shut everything down. We were flying from Los Angeles up to San Francisco every week to mentor the startups in their recent cohort, getting them ready for demo day. But it was before then. I think we stepped down from Court Buddy. It was November 2019. And, we had been working on Court Buddy for 5 years just straight, and we were exhausted. So it was nice to have a moment to just breathe. And so we decided to travel, and we went to Thailand for a month. And that was the time to think, well, what do we want for the future? What are we going to do next? And I had always wanted to write a book in a pretty life-changing event that happened to me. And I wanted to teach other kids how to essentially cope and stay connected. So I guess I'll go into how GuardianLane even came about.
It sounds like we're moving into it. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. So when I was 7 years old, my dad died from cancer, and I actually did not get any type of support. My school, like I think you heard in the pitch, gave me a Christmas tree. Didn't even introduce me to potentially other students at the school who had lost a loved one. It was just, we're sorry for your loss here. Like, this is from our community. Here's a Christmas tree. And so it really made me feel alone. And I think my mom did try to put me in counseling once. And all I can remember is it was a dark, scary ride to the office. And I remember the smell of burnt popcorn.
Amazing what you remember.
So that clearly did not help.
No, that did not.
So I had to find my own ways to cope and mentally, process what happened. And, why is my story so different from my friends at school and outside of school? They still have both of their parents. Like, what happened? Why did I lose mine? And so throughout the years, I found like really random, quirky ways to just stay connected to my dad. So for example, everybody in their house or apartment, you have some weird, leak, or the door cracks open every once in a while. Well, I had a shower door that would always pop open. And every time I would hear that, that was like my reminder to like say hi to my dad. Like, it was like my way of saying, oh, he's here. And so I knew throughout the years, I think when I was 17 years old, it hit me that I wanted to write a book. Never did it. But now that I had that time after Court Buddy, I was like, now's the time. I understand how to write the book, find an editor, and also get it published. And so decided to write a book called My Forever Guardian. And it follows 5 characters who each have a different type of loss, whether it be a sibling, a pet, a grandparent. And then I put myself in the book. Little Christina's in there. And through the process of writing this book, I was like, wait a minute, these characters are helping each other heal through their own ways of staying connected to the person they've lost. And I said, this is a social healing network. And so the techie in me was like, wait a minute, does this exist? And so went on a hunt to try to find what was available for kids to connect online, to help them through their grieving process. And to my surprise, it was like a desert. All I could find were local efforts. So whether it be a local grief group or a local grief camp. And I'm looking at also the culture of children today with TikTok and YouTube. And I'm like, wait a minute, we have to catch up for these kids. Why is everything
there's definitely
still so isolated?
I was going to say, there's definitely a lot out there for them, but it's not necessarily helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
And everything is so siloed, and you need a car or a plane ride to get to these resources. So it didn't make any sense. And so started talking to people in the industry. So whether it be grief counselors, doctors, pediatricians, and also grieving parents, just to be an ear, like what does this space need? Because the last thing I wanted to do was create something that I thought the children needed. And so what came out of those discussions was that you have to lead with feeling. Like, what is the child feeling? And from that, you can then provide them a path to healing. And the second point was that children express themselves through play, which we all know, that a child may not vocalize how they're feeling or what they're currently experiencing, but you allow them to play and it will come out. So with those two concepts that came out of my conversations, I really looked at the landscape of what was available for children. And that's how GuardianLane really came to be. So I'll just say the full 1 minute pitch. So GuardianLane is essentially a mental health platform that's innovating children's grief counseling. So we're using video sharing technology, community, and telecounseling. And I like to wrap it up with a whole lot of fun. So essentially the children access the site by clicking on how they're feeling. And this is actually being recorded for the family to have some data around how to support the child further. The emotion that they select leads them to content that's specifically created for that grief emotion. And this is content that was made for GuardianLane. So it was never produced prior, and you cannot find it outside of GuardianLane. And so it walks them through an activity, whether it be painting, songwriting, movement. We have like memory boxes, like jewelry making so that you can have something always on you in the memory of the person that you've lost. And the whole idea is to allow them to express how they're feeling. Because I'm sure you know, with ACEs, when a child holds in and cannot express the emotions and the feelings and the hurt, it can lead to long-term mental and health problems. And so the whole idea of GuardianLane is to get it out, and then also to share, to know that they're not alone. So under every single video, you will see a response video from the children. So when they're finished their project, They actually upload it back to the site so children can see, oh, wait a minute, I'm not alone in how I'm feeling. I'm not alone in this experience that I've gone through. And it allows them to really get on a healthy grieving journey.
So that video that they make after watching that content is available to kids who watch it, that same section later on, so they can make that connection? Exactly.
So all the videos of the children's projects lives under the grief counselor's main video.
As I mentioned kind of at the top, between the extraordinary reasons that we're all having difficulties now, be it the losses due to COVID or other struggles that our society is facing, and couple that with the fact that our mental health system for kids is in shambles, at least in our state and maybe in others. It seems like a real critical need. Business-wise, though, how do you make money for this? Is this something that insurers will cover?
So it's actually a marketplace. So the schools that we're partnered with, or the families that have created accounts for their children, they can actually book one-on-one sessions with the featured grief counselors. So that is how the platform makes money. And for the schools, we sell packages. So a school will start with 20 sessions that they can just pull from, and it goes up. They can either purchase 20, 40, or 60 sessions for their schools. So we have some districts that purchase for multiple schools, and a district can create multiple schools accounts where they can log in and literally just book times, and it's pulling from that district's the bundle that they've purchased.
That's clever. So it complements their existing counseling and sort of provides them support. And do they also see the responses in the videos from the children to sort of measure their...
So they can't see the videos. They can see how the child has checked in. So they can see if over time a child, has checked in, 55% of the time is sad and maybe, 2% happy. So they can have at least some understanding over time how the child is, like how they started and how they are after interacting with the site.
And one thing I haven't heard you mention is COVID. This is not a response to we can't see people anymore, we can't be in the same room. This sounds like something that's built for the long term, for the long haul.
Definitely. It just happens, the timing. So it's interesting. I released the book in April of 2020, right when the world was shutting down. And there was just, a heaviness on the world. And I wondered, is this the right time to even release anything? And I remember talking to friends and family, and they're like, have you been looking at the news? This is the absolute perfect time to release a book on grief and loss. And so nothing that we've done was in direct response to COVID. It was just something that happened to align with what was happening in the world. And but to give you some stats on how many children have been affected by COVID, there is a website that we can actually link to that's tracking how many children have been affected. And to date, it's around 1.1 million children. So that's been affected as in someone they know has passed away.
Oh my gosh. Okay. No, that's a big number. Yeah. And that's kind of a hard thing to explain too. So you're right that the timing couldn't be better. What were the rewards of winning the pitch contest, and where do you go from here with GuardianLane?
Yeah. So I'm still on cloud 9 and in shock. We were up against some amazing
really great
entrepreneurs and in medical devices. And so winning first place is a $25,000 non-dilutive grant. And in terms of where we go next, so we launched in January of this year, and we've already partnered with over 1,000 schools. That traction happened way faster than I could have ever expected. And so now I need to build the team around me to not only support the children, but to support the company. So that 25K is going to go into really helping build out the team.
That's a lot of schools. And are you centered in one part of the country? Or are you all over?
So, yeah. So the 1,000 schools actually are in Texas and in Chicago. So we have a lot more schools to get to. And I don't know if you've seen the news, but schools are actually getting quite a bit of funding to put towards social and emotional learning and well-being. So now is the time to really get in front of them.
That's a great point. Okay. Well, I hope this helps. It's a great idea. And as I said, the help is needed. So it's nice that you're able to feed your entrepreneurial bug and also help a lot of kids and families. So that's a great pairing. Well, that's it. Thanks for joining us on the podcast, Christina. Congratulations. And I look forward to hearing about GuardianLane as it spreads east and west across the country.
Oh, no, thank you so much.
Let's go to number 3, Chris.
All right, number 3 on the list. This. If you've been around the device industry enough, you know that Regal versus Medtronic, the Supreme Court decision from about a decade ago, is very important. I mean, the Regal ruling found that basically if a device has a PMA from the FDA that provides you a lot of lawsuit protection, preemption. But we now have a case in a federal court in North Carolina in which the estate of a woman died after some problems with implantation of a Watchman device from Boston Scientific. Her estates sued Boston Sci. The Watchman, which is a stroke prevention device, of course, has pre-market approval. So Boston Sci was making a motion to get this dismissed based on preemption, and the estate of Gene Penland that was suing Boston Sci was arguing, well, our claims involve like a clear and specific manufacturing and assembling defect, and that's what we're suing Boston Sci over. And that this defect, they're claiming like that's what caused Gene Penland to eventually die. It's like, by the way, the lawsuit's very, very, very sad death. I mean, it was unfortunately with something, it's just not. It was definitely it was a tough way to go reading that lawsuit. Let's just say that. But the judge, he didn't make a ruling exactly about preemption, but he said, hey, I think they have enough of an argument here. Let's move forward, do discovery in this case. So, this thing could turn into, this definitely looks like a case to watch, because this could eventually end up, being a type of case that could kind of change the way the courts handle preemption, which is a really important thing legally for medical device companies. So that's number 3 on our list today, is this Watchman-related lawsuit.
Oh, that's a big news for sure. And you had some other news from Boston Scientific as well?
Yeah, Boston Scientific had a lot of legal news this week. They also settled a host of pelvic mesh lawsuits with 47 states in the District of Columbia.
Wow.
They're not admitting wrongdoing, but they're going to pay nearly $189 million. And just Boston Sci alone has been paying out hundreds of millions of dollars related to pelvic mesh in recent years. It's definitely, like a number of companies made it. FDA ordered a halt to the sales of it in 2019. It's definitely one of the big failures of the medical device industry over the past decade, and even the subject of documentaries. And I mean, it's definitely a tough thing. And I think this, at least for Boston Sci, maybe this looks like they might be just wrapping up a lot of the legal stuff around it at this point. Settling with all these states. Here's to hoping we're finally maybe seeing, these settlements starting to wrap up.
Yep.
And, we don't, see a failure this bad for a while in the device industry.
Bring those families some comfort, some measure of comfort, hopefully. Yeah,
exactly.
All right. Well, let's move on to, that was number 3, was a 2-parter. Now we'll move into number 2.
Well, number 2, this is a little more cheerier, Tom. I mean, I know, this has been a little bit more of a somber newsmakers this week, but we've got Medtronic. They got a CE mark approval for their Sensite directional lead system for deep brain stimulation therapy, and this is being kind of touted as the only directional lead with built-in sensing capabilities, and so this could allow for much more personalized therapy when it's coming to using deep brain stimulation to treat kind of like a host of different brain disorders. So this device is under review by FDA, but it looks like some innovation in the deep brain stimulation space. It's now going to be available in Europe.
That's great news.
Yeah, good news. Yeah, I just saying, hey, and number one on the list, this is actually a pretty good story for the industry too.
In addition to talking about toilet paper in our first episode, we were talking about the stock prices of medtech companies had taken the tank initially, and we were commenting that typically medtech is rather resilient, or healthcare in general is rather resilient.
And it turns out they pretty much were. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was actually, if you haven't if for people who don't know, Mass Device and MDO, we've got our MedTech 100 index, which has the world's 100 largest medical device companies on it. It ended up being, their stocks ended up being up like nearly 20% last year. S&P 500 was 16. So,
do you want to introduce our special guest, Chris Newmarker?
Yeah, we got senior editor Danielle Kirsch, who did a much deeper dive, looking at, we've got all these annual reports coming out right now from the big medtech companies. And Danielle, welcome. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Basically, I found that I took the annual reports from the recently released 20 of the world's largest medical device companies and found that their revenues only decreased about 0.3% year over year from 2019. So, and the big difference between that and like a normal year, 2018 to 2019, the industry saw a revenue increase 3.4% in normal times. So it's not too big of a difference, I would say.
Yeah, it looks like normally they were up like 3.4% in 2019, and 2020 was just like a little tiny dip. It was pretty much the same.
Yeah, and the companies that really top the list of increased sales, you can probably guess the diagnostics and imaging companies, because all these companies that are making COVID tests, and they were able to thrive right now and benefit from everything that happened last year. But all of the elective procedure device companies like orthopedics and some heart device companies were more on the bottom of the list and took bigger hits. But some analysts are saying that there's a pent-up demand for those procedures, so it may increase in the next year.
Yeah, so it could be a good year for them. And for those who want to really delve in this article more, it's called How Big MedTech Fared During a Year of COVID-19, and it's posted on Medical Design Outsourcing and Mass Device. And I guess to figure out how it's going to go in 2021, for those who don't know, you have a gopher in your backyard, right, Danielle? You occasionally, he's a nice guy. Do you want to share the name of your groundhog in your backyard?
Yeah, Barry the groundhog. He loves to eat the pears off my pear trees. So once that starts blooming, he'll be here.
So is there a way, the way Barry has been acting, does it indicate how the medical device industry is going to do in 2021?
Great question.
I haven't asked. I've barely seen him, but when he comes out, I can surely yell across the yard and ask Barry how's it going.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, see what Barry can tell us about the device, or maybe
we'd love to have him on the podcast. Yeah, I think it'd be great to talk to Barry,
our first wildlife guest.
You should point out that Danielle has lost power, so she's on her phone on this call, which is why she sounds a little fuzzy and why we saved her for last. But she was truly dedicated to bring you this news. So great wrap up there, Danielle.
Yeah, great job, Danielle.
And now it's time for our closing keynote conversation. Let's welcome Steve MacMillan, CEO of Hologic. Well, Steve MacMillan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us, Tom.
I can't imagine a busier med tech company than you've been over the past year, and I want to take apart all of those different maneuvers. It's just it's been an insane year for all of us, but for you folks in particular. But before we get into all that juicy stuff, I want to understand your path into med tech. How did you choose a career in this industry?
Sure, I'll try to be pretty simple or quick because it's probably not the most exciting part. But if you actually look at my career, I spent my first 3 years at Procter & Gamble. So, great company with a rich history. And then if you take it some slices from there, I was then about a decade at J&J, a decade at Stryker. And believe it or not, I'm coming up on almost a decade at Hologic, in my 8th year at Hologic. And I think the biggest piece that I noticed when I left P&G and went to J&J, it was this magic of still doing business, but suddenly in healthcare, feeling like you're making a difference in the world. Mm-hmm. And that, for the next 30 years has been the magic for me. Really, a decade at J&J, great company, decade at Stryker, great company, making a difference in people's lives. And then coming to Hologic has been even more magical in that there's no company on the planet that's done more for breast and cervical cancer women, anybody having breast or cervical cancer than Hologic. And my own mother is a 2-time breast cancer survivor.
Oh, really?
So it's been, kind of a very personal part of the journey as well for me, and just magical we're businesses that can make a real difference in the world. And that's been the fun.
That's a great point. And I was thinking about that today, hearing about J&J and the vaccine. It must be, for me, someone who covers the industry, just to hear all of the names of the companies I've been following forever kind of being reported on as bringing on this test or this drug. It's nice to see our industry get some attention in a positive way as providing a solution for.
Well, you're so right. If I can just jump in on that, I'm always struck by, particularly as you recruit younger people today coming off college campuses, this and that, right? Everybody wants to make a difference in the world. And a lot of them are looking at nonprofit organizations or government. And I would argue, and particularly when you look at the response from the private sector in the last year to the biggest issue facing the world, right? First, it was, the testing company, diagnostic companies responding, we're the ones that developed the tests. Mm-hmm. And now you look at what's been achieved in the pharmaceutical biotech industry with the vaccines.
Unbelievable.
It's the companies that you have covered,
yep.
Year in and year out that have come to the rescue here. And I think we're really on an exciting time right now where we're finally, hopefully, can start to see some real lights ahead of us and getting back to some normalcy that the private sector, while the governments have been there, it's been the private sector that's been making the difference.
That's a great point about recruiting. I know you're not directly involved with the hiring of people, but I do wonder if you're getting a sense that the medtech industry is perhaps getting some cachet with younger people, and it would be easy to draw them away from maybe an Amazon or a Google that always had that buzz factor. But our buzz factor, I think, is more warranted than creating a faster way to ship a box.
In an odd way, I think we haven't played that up as much as we've almost taken it for granted. Mm-hmm. And the interesting part, if you actually go back to Larry Fink's letter a couple of years ago from BlackRock, talking about, really all companies, public and private, need to serve a social purpose. To some degree, I think that's been a catalyst. It's been a catalyst for us to actually say, wait a minute, that is what we have been doing. We are the epitome of that company. But realize we probably haven't been screaming it as loudly from the rooftops, even in recruiting. We've almost taken it for granted a little bit. But to some degree, I think all of us hopefully getting more aggressive at telling our story. And I do think we're seeing more people and some of the younger folks really interested, especially, anybody that's studying science, even the STEM, anything, they can make a massive difference in the world with us versus, to your point, shipping boxes faster. Not that that's not important too.
No.
But what we're doing, we think is pretty special.
Agreed. And it's many people I talk to have a personal story like you with your mother. And because we're all, and it's not because we're unique. We're just, every person in the world is touched by healthcare at one point or the other. When I started covering this industry, my parents were getting older, and that was a motivation of mine. I wanted to understand what was sort of coming ahead. So this is an industry that touches everyone, whether we realize it or not. So I think it's something that we all should be harping on a little bit and making people know it. But let's fast forward then to last year when it became clear that there was a big train coming down the tracks at us in the form of the pandemic. When did it become evident at Hologic that this was brewing, and what was your sort of initial response?
I think when it was brewing became a little more obvious really in March of last year. And I remember even at our March board meeting, which was the first week of March, at the audit committee, our IS lead was reporting that they were preparing for a work from home scenario if all of our people had to work from home. And I have to tell you, Tom, my eyes were glazed over. I was barely paying attention to that, thinking, I'm glad you guys have prepared for that. I can't even imagine that happening. And you think about how fast things happen. 3 weeks later, we were doing that. So, me, big visionary CEO, couldn't see 3 weeks into the future. But as soon as that came, I think we responded in some ways like a lot of companies did, and in other ways, I think very differently. We certainly, first thoughts were, we've got to conserve cash. We have no idea what's going to happen to demand. We watched our surgical business, literally drop 90% in about a 2-week period, just dried up as hospitals closed down and shifted to focus on COVID. So we put in furloughs. We, cut, sad times at plants. We cut salaries of management, all the way up to me, to our board. We did, all of those kind of standard things. At the same time, what was fascinating is we left a lot of the decisions to local managers. So we didn't just do these edicts of, okay, everybody's going to go to a 4-day week or everybody's going to do this. So we left a lot up to the individual managers with overall goals. And because simultaneously, we were pivoting in our diagnostics division, we were working first on developing our PCR-based test for COVID. And then we transitioned even further to our TMA, the second high volume test. So our San Diego facility never shut down. I work out of that. Mike Watts works out of that. We've been to the office every day the entire year. And so that team pivoted quickly, the R&D teams, the manufacturing teams, the regulatory teams. And, I remember even in those days, some of the manufacturing employees just coming up to me as I'd walk to the cafeteria, just saying, hey, thank you for not shutting us down. When, as you know, the state of California had largely shut down and people didn't know where things were going at that point. We were one of the few that people were still showing up at the office or the broader facility every day. And I think it allowed us to make a difference.
Absolutely. How about on the product side? We launched this podcast about a year ago to this day, and I think our second episode featured Kevin Thornall from Hologic talking about a new diagnostic tool for COVID. How much of that was, well, obviously you didn't have COVID, you weren't developing COVID tests for months on end, but you seemed to pivot so quickly to sort of being, if not the diagnostics company for COVID. You were coming out with test after test. I mean, you had an infrastructure with the Panther products kind of out there already. What was that process like of, all right, we are the company that has to answer the call. We have the infrastructure in place. We can develop the tests. Let's divert resources toward that. What was that process like?
It was an amazing time. And I would say both exhilarating, exhausting. It was unlike anything I have ever experienced in my career. First and foremost, I was so proud internally of our R&D team. And, our head of R&D of our diagnostics business, he actually has an additional degree in public health. So as he kind of said, as COVID started to build up, he said, I was put on the planet for this kind of stuff. And what his team did first to develop the first assay and then the second assay, working round the clock, literally sending stuff into the FDA at 3 a.m. on a Saturday and just constant dialogue. That team was just incredibly engaged. And if you recall, we had first launched basically our fusion-based assay, which is our PCR technology. And as soon as we launched that, I experienced what I've never had in my career, which is the onslaught of literally practically every governor in the country, a whole bunch of congressmen, senators, number of different, White House task forces from the Dr. Birx regime to, a whole bunch of other different parts of the domestic policy advisors, to also suddenly getting personal letters from Boris Johnson, from Jacinda Ardern, from, in New Zealand, and prime ministers around the world reaching out, also wanting product. And that was an external piece that I've just never encountered in my career. And Kevin and I were triaging calls and managing that side of it in something we've never done, and trying to be fair but also honest in the early days where demand way outstripped supply. So Kevin and his team were doing an amazing job of trying to accommodate both as many customers in the US, as many states, this and that, and navigating the situation unlike we had ever done. And meanwhile, our production teams had totally shifted from making our women's health assays to all of the additional, label changes, everything we had to do to be able to supply and ramp production in a way we never had. We averaged about 7 million tests a month.
Wow.
And within a few months of that, we were up at almost double that. So we were both, our place in San Diego looked like a construction zone while we were also producing stuff. And, the entire parking lot was filled with crates and, just all kinds of supplies. It was unlike anything we'd ever experienced.
That's amazing. So you were getting letters sent to you from these world leaders?
Yes. And some of them very personally signed. The one from Boris Johnson actually came right before he went into the hospital.
Wow.
Just people that we had never heard from. And that they had never heard of Hologic either, to be quite frank, prior to that. And you suddenly had, a number of governors. Kevin Thornall probably personally spoke to at least 25 governors in the country that, 60 days, 30 days prior to those discussions, they had no idea what Hologic was. And suddenly they're telling us, hey, I've been out touring the labs in our state, the public health labs. They're saying this Panther is great. We've got to get throughput going on it. What can you do to help us out? And, we kind of staged with them, hey, here's where we are in our production builds. And you know what, a month from now, we'll be in a very different place. We can try to take care of you. And we're building it up and trying to be as fair as we could.
It's amazing how remarkable that sounds now. But as you tell the story, I'm taken back to that time when all the governors were scrambling to get resources for their state. They were all sort of trying to, so I can certainly see that perfectly fits the narrative of the time. You joked earlier about working from home and how you didn't see 3 weeks ahead. But at the time, now say April, May of last year, I mean, there was still, we looking back, we probably all think, oh no, we knew it was coming. We didn't really know it was coming. We had events at DeviceTalks in June that we canceled, but we had one in September it was September that some people were like, well, maybe, and there was sort of a pushback. Now you kind of look back, you're like, oh my God, what were we thinking? So I guess I'm telling that story to say we still didn't know what we were dealing with. What did you think you were dealing with April and May? Were you pushing all your chips onto the diagnostics part of the table and betting heavily on that, knowing that this was going to be what it became, or were you still sort of trying to feel your way around it?
Always feeling our way around it. As I say to our employees, there was no playbook for this, right? And I do think it's a time where, frankly, employees were looking for leadership.
Yeah.
And I think all of us were looking for leadership in our lives. And to some degree, I think many of us were disappointed on certain fronts on that front. And I think it's part of where the governors were scrambling. There was a whole bunch of scrambling all over the place. I would love to tell you, we had some grand plan.
Yeah.
I would say I probably was never managing more minute to minute. Kevin and I, luckily his office is about 100 feet from mine. We joked about the well-worn pathway between our offices. We were making decisions to invest more in capital, to, expand, but not knowing. And we made a whole bunch of decisions, even as we were investing to gear up much more production for the fall. Because what I did see, and I did talk about this with our team, I think by doing a lot of the lockdowns, what we did is I'd use the analogy of air in a balloon. We pushed out, there would have normally been more cases in March, April, May of last year. But by locking down, all we really did is delayed them. And so we were betting on the fall being a big time for a COVID surge. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, even at that point, a lot of the Wall Street people were thinking it's going to be over by then. Right? It's back to none of us really knew.
Yeah.
And it'd be great to be able to go back and put people, as you just did with yourself, what were we thinking at the time? Because people forget that. All I did know is I thought it was going to be a difficult fall, winter, because we were pushing this thing out. And so we bet on really trying to scale our production, being there for our customers for that time. At the same token, we have a breast health and surgical business that were going nowhere. The main thing we did there was we communicated and we took care of our sales teams. We said for our salespeople who are all commission, we said, look, we're going to pay you at least 80% of what you got last year.
That's great.
So we want to make sure that regardless of how long this goes, we have your back.
That's great.
And those kinds of decisions paid off enormously later in the year, and just that loyalty and trust in the management. So it was multitasking in ways and just being flexible, nimble. We had no idea we had to close a bunch of our plants, and then started to see some little tidbits. Okay, let's start to get some people back. But it was truly, our management team started to meet basically via phone weekly. We used to do it bi-weekly, just so we could all stay very close and make decisions together as we progressed through the time.
That's a great point about Wall Street. And also I did want to understand how you were sort of managing that expectations, but the other relationship that you have to work with these products, we all do in devices, or all of you do in devices, I just talked to you, but it's dealing with the FDA. And it seemed at the time there was so many EUAs given, all these things were happening, and we didn't have a choice. We needed solutions, but it seemed like the rigor was being put aside, again, for understandable reasons. How would you characterize your relationship and your exchange with the FDA, getting all these diagnostics out on the product? How do you think they did? And similarly, let's talk just about the FDA first, and then we can kind of go back to Wall Street. So how did the FDA fare, in your opinion, during all of that?
I would put it as truly some of the best of moments of FDA. I've never seen teams work harder. I think those people, just like our teams in San Diego, they all rallied, and literally they were reviewing our EUA applications during the weekend. We submitted it on a Saturday. We were approved by late Monday. They worked round the clock, but even prior to that, we were in communications with them, and they were responding very quickly to all the questions instead of waiting for a document to show up on their desk, so that we knew by the time we actually submitted the data and the formal application, they had already been reviewing the data, in advance. And it was truly, I think, one of those great public-private partnerships where I truly think they deserve an enormous amount of credit, as they do with the vaccines. They created streamlined ways that did not affect safety, and to help get more and more products out there. And that's what the world needed, first in tests and second in vaccines. So I really think the FDA deserves a lot of credit that probably they haven't necessarily even got during this time frame.
No, that's a great point. And with the vaccines in particular, we've had 60 million doses at this point, and knock wood, nothing negative, really significant negative outcomes to point to.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, with the FDA, less with how they dealt with you, but they did approve a lot of diagnostics. Like we were at Mass Device, there seemed to be 3 or 4 a day, and I couldn't tell them apart. I don't know which one. That sort of muddies the water, I would think, for Hologic. If you've got all these little companies saying, I have one over here too. What did that do to the diagnostics field for COVID? Did it make it harder for you to make a case, or were you comfortable with your position as a clear leader?
We're comfortable with our position. I have described it. It was a little bit of the wild, wild west, because there were so many companies jumping in. But at the same token, demand was still outstripping supply. And so in that equation, it was hard for us to be saying, hey, wait a minute, slow things down, when the greater good was getting tests out there for people. Would I have preferred to have a few less approved and, our market share would have been even bigger? Maybe a little, but we were selling everything we could make.
Yeah.
And we knew the demand was there. So I think they did the right thing in terms of EUAs at the time. Now the question becomes whether some of those should continue to be on. And they've been actually doing that, going back and revoking a few of the EUAs, or ultimately if people want formal clearances, that'll be a different path. And I do think that's where what I say is the cream rises to the top. So, we had that period, and now I think we're going to be in the period of the shakeout.
That's an interesting point. And that's more of my point, is that there were so many tests out there that you talk to friends and like, oh, I got a test. It said I didn't have it. I did have it. Now, this one had a test, and it just seemed to really shine negatively on tests as a whole, because there was so many out there. People just lose faith in the test overall. To
me, there were two negatives coming out about testing, neither of which were good. And, some still, kind of overhangs that we obviously want to work through. The first was that the molecular tests take way too long to get back. And that was really because particularly the reference labs, the Quest and LabCorps were just overwhelmed in the beginning. And it was a game of trains, planes, and automobiles. Right? You're, swabbing somebody in California, you're shipping the test off to New Jersey, it's taking time to, get tested and get back and all of that. And it was just, a bit of a mess there, so that I worried that molecular tests were being tarnished a bit around time to result. And that gave, I think, a little bit more of an impetus for the FDA to give more EUAs for the antigen tests. And the antigen tests, all the experts have always known, are far less sensitive and specific. And normally probably would have, we would have preferred to be more active at talking about their shortcomings. But at a time when we couldn't meet full demand and consumers wanted something, it was, I think, the lesser of all evils to still get some, not as accurate tests out there.
Yep.
But it is difficult because many of the antigen tests have so many false negatives where, people think they're okay and they're really not. So I'm hopeful that as time has passed, more and more are going to the better tests and people are seeking out. And I think we've gotten much better turnaround times now on the molecular tests, which, will give you both, the better turnaround time and a much more efficacious test.
That's well said. Yeah. And my comments, as you took them, are not critical of anyone, just more commentary on the tests themselves.
Yeah. And we were always looking and concerned because we also had 1 million people, a lot of these little startup fly-by-nights and especially foreign companies that suddenly said they had a COVID test and they wanted us to distribute it and all that stuff. And we stuck very close to our knitting, which is, we have a phrase and it's on the wall behind me, the science of sure. Mm-hmm. If we don't have great, compelling data, we're not going to lower our standard just to get additional revenue in the door if we can't stand behind the absolute sensitivity, specificity of our diagnostic tests.
That's great. Well, I'm going to put the Wall Street question aside because I want to focus on Hologic, and I know we have limited time. So COVID has really changed so many institutions. I'm wondering how it changed Hologic. You divested the aesthetics business. You've acquired a number of companies in the diagnostics business. Has Hologic's makeup changed? Will it be different in the future? And is that a result of COVID, or was it a plan that was in place, or was it a plan that was in place that was perhaps accelerated by COVID, like so many other institutions have been? I'm asking 3 questions there, but how has all of this changed Hologic? And then I want to understand why the changes came about.
That was absolutely, you referenced about skipping over Wall Street. That was a Wall Street kind of approach. I have one question with 14 legs to it, so that because they know they only get one question and one.
And then I'll have a follow.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But on a more serious note there, Tom, I would say what has happened to us is one of the phrases you put in there it's accelerated the plan we were already on. And clearly post the divestiture of Cynosure and refocusing on our three core businesses. Our whole approach in our diagnostics business has been place more Panthers around the world and add more menus, some more tests. And we have been placing more and more of those Panthers out in a decentralized fashion. Instead of just being high volume machines at, call it Quest and LabCorp, we've been placing them in hospitals, placing them in the regional labs, everything else, and then adding menus. So in addition to our women's health assays, we've just been building out more and more test assays. So in a way, we were perfectly positioned with those Panthers that we've been placing for the last 8 years to capitalize on the COVID situation and then, be able to run our tests through there. And in turn, our success there has created additional cash flow in the nearer term that we've been able to then go do some acquisitions like Acessa for our surgical business, and then really 2 diagnostics acquisitions earlier this year, both Biotheranostics and now most recently Diagenode. So it's allowing us really to build even stronger. And to one of your other points, every company sits there and says, we're going to come out of this stronger on the other side. There is zero doubt. And our employees know that we are coming out stronger. We have strengthened every step of the way through this. And with all the additional Panther placements, we've increased our Panther placements globally by almost a third. I mean, I kind of joke, if we could have created an event that would allow us to double our Panther placements every year for a couple of years, that would have been the single greatest thing we could do to make us stronger on the other side. Well, it happened. I hate to say, we didn't manufacture that event, but with that happening, it has strengthened it. And it's then taken our whole company reputation, especially internationally, to a completely different level. As I mentioned, when Boris Johnson and, the prime ministers of, and presidents of so many of the countries all throughout Europe and Asia now know the Hologic name, opening doors already for other things in our breast health business and other things in our diagnostics businesses. So we're just on a very different plane now than we were.
Yeah, I was watched and I don't know what the date of the video on your website was, but it did mention you had, I think, 2,000 Panther machines. You were expecting to place another 500, and I suspect that's probably a little out of date. But you increased production staff by 50%. So, I mean, there's some big numbers and some big growth going there. Just that you mentioned the 2 companies you're acquiring. Are you done buying, or are you still shopping around?
We're still shopping around. We're staying disciplined. There's a lot of acquisitions to be had out there. There's a lot of money chasing deals right now. I think we want to continue to be very smart and, do these tuck-in deals that will strengthen our existing businesses. So we're still out there poking around, certainly.
And what sort of roadmap are you following in these acquisitions? Are you building Hologic for another pandemic, or are you satisfied with what you have on sort of the infectious disease side, and you're more going back to your bread and butter in women's health and really focusing on that?
It's really more our bread and butter. You know what? Yeah. I would say I'm enormously proud of how we have capitalized to both make a difference in the world with our COVID testing and make a difference for, so many lives. But at the end of the day, our goal all the way through has been to emerge as a stronger company on our core businesses, such that if COVID revenue goes to 0 in a few years, which, by the way, will probably be really good for humankind.
Yes,
and
we all hope that.
That's okay. That even if that happens, our core businesses will be growing faster. So, building on, our strong presence in breast cancer and cervical cancer, and now with Biotheranostics, kind of building that same thing, continuing breast cancer in a different way, and, just continue to build out especially our women's health, but a little more into some of the oncology diagnostics. It's kind of what we've been in breast cancer and cervical cancer to begin with, but building out all of those.
I want to hit two more points. One of them is, and despite my slightly disparaging comment about Google, you do have a collaboration with Google Cloud for the next generation digital diagnostic capabilities. What does that effort look like?
It's really an extension of a lot of what we've been doing in first our breast health business over the last 5+ years, which is using more and more artificial intelligence to be able to help read and help radiologists speed up their ability to read and detect cancers. And we're bringing that same thinking over to the cervical cancer side and partnering with Google on that, so that's an area we don't have quite as much of our own data. So being able to tap in with them and have them helping us develop that AI capability on the cervical cancer side is another way for us to build things out.
Terrific. And final question, or discussion. You've started a new global women's health index. You're working with Gallup on a world poll. So tell us what is this effort for? How are you doing it? And what can we look forward to getting from it later on, I guess, in terms of data and information?
Thanks for asking. This is an idea that one of our people came up with a couple of years ago. It just said, there's really no good data on women's health globally, particularly country by country. And what if we partnered with Gallup, who does this thing known as the Gallup World Poll every year, and developed actually questions to start to bring a greater lens on women's health. And so we had started this literally a couple of years ago. We fielded it. It was just being fielded about a year ago for the first time. Kind of the March, April timeframe. It was going into the field. We're literally out talking to 120,000 people in 116 countries. And we, by the way, did not pull the plug. We said, even though we weren't sure about money, everything else, this was a commitment we made. We wanted to start because we just don't think there's enough information about women's health. And we thought if we can start to shine a brighter light on women's health and bring data to governments around the world, that alone will start to have a massive impact. It's back to what gets measured gets acted upon, right? And you have a lot of governments that say, boy, we want to make sure that 50% of all women are getting screened for cancer every 2 years. Well, they're not necessarily measuring that. We're able to go out and now in this poll, for example, we can now go country by country and say, here are your goals. Here's the data we have found. And it's designed really just to be an enabler of shining that brighter light on things. We also figured it would elevate the Hologic name to some degree by helping to bring this data, but we never wanted it to look, crass and commercial. Therefore, and I think part of what's been fascinating that people have been intrigued with, we're also asking about categories we're not in, like cardiovascular health. We're asking about domestic violence. And I think the fascinating part is we started this beforehand, but I think in a pandemic world where women and women's health has probably been far more backburnered, women have put others ahead of themselves in so many ways. I think the data that's just starting to roll off from the first year is going to be fascinating and very illuminating. And I think it may turn out to be, I was talking to our board last week, that for all the products we've made in our life of our 3D mammography, the PAP test, our HPV tests, everything else, in its own way, this product being the data that we get from this thing may turn out to have the biggest impact on human health of anything we've ever done. And it's not a product we're going to sell or monetize. It's just, I think, part of being a company with a deep purpose and hopefully bringing something to society that's going to be tremendous value.
It's certainly topical following last year's killing of George Floyd and just the look at inequities in a society, including in particular healthcare. I think it's certainly a topical discussion. This is something that you're going to be producing annually for the foreseeable future?
Yes, we are. And we've committed to that. And interestingly, the World Economic Forum, so the group that obviously has the meeting in Davos every year, as they learned about this, they've invited us to join with them on their journey as well, because they're so fascinated by the impact they think this study can have. And they said, there's nobody that's ever done anything like this in the world. And it should be able to have a massive impact on human health, not just women's health, but by definition, human health.
Excellent. Well, this has been a really illuminating conversation. I'm grateful for the time, and I hope your spring is a little calmer than a year ago. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us, Tom. It's great to see you again. You take care of yourself.
You too, Steve. Take care. All right, it was great to hear from Steve MacMillan from Hologic and Chris Newmarker. You know what time it is, right, Chris?
Hey, it's time to tell everybody how they can reach us.
That's right. So I'll go first. Actually, no, Danielle's our guest. Danielle, you should go first. Danielle Kirsch, where can folks find you on the social media machine?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Danielle_Kirsch, Kirsh, and LinkedIn, same name, Danielle Kirsch.
And are you hanging out at the clubhouse like Chris Newmarker and I?
I haven't yet.
Well, we'll have to get you on there so you can be like one of the cool kids and listen to people talk all day long. But the best hour on Clubhouse probably I would say is 11:30 a.m. Eastern time on Mondays.
That's the time I'm definitely on. So with you.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Come on and say hi to us.
We have. Come on, 11:30 a.m. here. Great hour of MedTech audio. Chris Newmarker and I will be there with many guests. We're hoping to have Christina Jones, the CEO of GuardianLane, join us to talk about her very, very important company and her experience with the MedTech Color pitch contest. And hopefully we'll have some other friends as well.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Hey, and you can find me too on LinkedIn. Chris Newmarker, just like a Newmarker. I'm on Twitter as well, at Newmarker. Always happy to talk to people.
And I am on Twitter at MedTechTom, on Clubhouse at MedTechTom, and on LinkedIn, Tom Salemi, like Salem with an I at the end of it. And that is all the information we have for you on that. And with that, please do share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. Make sure you post it on social media. When you do, tag Chris, Danielle, and myself so we can be part of that conversation. Please do check out Danielle Kirsch's story on MDO. It's an important story. We'll have it up on social media as well, so you can find it there. And subscribe. That's the best way to get this podcast first. We've got lots of folks who listen to this the Friday night when I post it. So people are subscribing. You should as well. I think, as Chris said poetically a few weeks ago, just do it or something like that. You were right
just
to the
do
point.
it. Sign up.
That's right.
You won't regret it.
You will not regret it. If you've listened this far to the podcast, and then subscribing is just the thing for you. And with that, tune in next week. We'll have another great episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast waiting for you.
Take care. Get vaccinated soon.
Just rub it in, Chris. That's fine. That's okay.
It's okay, man. They'll get it out of Massachusetts soon. You'll get it.